So today, as we look at health and healing, part one, I'd like to share a miracle story. I call it the miraculous healing of arthritis. I don't know if there's anybody in here. Is there anyone here that does experience some of those arthritis pains, aches, and things? I think I have some of that, or had some in my thumbs. I'm a quite a keyboard user. In our world, they would say that, continued use of the keyboard could cause pain and discomfort. But I saw a few hands there that you all know what I'm talking about when we have those aches and pains that seemingly come out of nowhere. Sometimes we know why, but a lot of times we don't. So in this particular miracle story, this happened during a time that I was teaching a group of practitioners, and we were covering something called EFT with the source technique. But in everything I do, I infuse it with those beautiful spiritual principles of A Course in Miracles, because I've learned through A Course in Miracles that all healing is of the mind. Now, we might hear that again and again, and then we kind of forget and we try to heal the body for a while. And then we go, oh, yeah, it's of the mind. I need to come back to the mind. What I like to do in my classes is have demonstrations that are live and they're public, and I'll have a whole group of people there. And I used to be quite nervous about this because the first few times that I invited someone to come in and do a public demo, you don't quite know how that's going to go. Your ego says you're a fool and you're going to look like a fool, right? And nothing's going to happen. But I would really try to just step over that. And I would remind myself that I am here for a holy purpose. I am here to remember that I am here to be helpful and that I'm not here to look like a star or to accomplish something. I am here to be helpful. What I did is I invited my students to invite other people in. And all of a sudden, this nice woman walked in, and I would say she was in her late 60s. And she sat down before me. What I learned very quickly is that she had a very severe form of arthritis, and she had splints on her hands. And you could see that her left hand, especially, was quite crippled by the arthritis. And we just sat there for a little bit and everyone got to know her. I would say this whole process took about 45 minutes, including getting to know her and hearing a little bit about her story. Now, what I know is that doing this work for so many years, going on, say, 30 years by now, doing this work so many years, what I've learned is that the body is the effect of the mind. And when your body is in discomfort, it means there's some discomfort in the mind. It doesn't mean we mean to be sick or we mean to have these symptoms. But what happens is we hold a lot within us. I call it your emotional vault. And I call that door, to the emotional vault. We have these traumas, we have experiences, we see other people in pain. And when we're feeling those things, it goes into our emotional vault and we close that door seemingly. And then that hurt and that pain or feelings of rejection or whatever it is, it sits in there and it just fires away, just like this, fires away until it is addressed and it is seen as no longer useful for any purpose, not even being right about the judgment that put it there. And we'll talk more about that. The more I talked to this nice woman, I heard a really very sad story that she went through as a child. They had moved over from another country, and I'll go ahead and tell you it was Russia. And this was many, many years ago. And so as a child, she moved over from Russia and she was not accepted by her community. There was a lot going on at that time about what Russia represented. And so she was pretty well rejected by her classmates, their families. And another heartache of hers was that she had a friend that she had to leave behind, her very best friend in Russia. So that was a great sadness for her. Like, her one true friend was so many miles away. And as she explained her story, and she wasn't complaining or anything like that, you could hear the sadness in her voice of what she went through. And this rejection went on for years and years. And this woman, I mean, God bless her, she had the strength and the fortitude to go on to become a scholar and continuing education. And she was a professor, and she'd had a really great career in teaching people, educating people. She was also very athletic. She did some mountain biking, and she was a ballerina, and she was really athletic, but no more because of this arthritis that was taking over her body. And I just heard this deep sadness in her. And I knew that as a child, she had accepted all of this rejection, and it really had never been addressed, expressed, talked about. No one had ever validated that for her, that that was a tough experience. So, what I do is I use something called EFT with the source technique, all given by God and a couple of other wonderful teachers that I have worked with. I call it resourcing. And I use this very structured process to get to the bottom of what is going on for somebody so that they are having this physical expression that is so uncomfortable. We started to go ahead and apply what I call EFT prayer tapping, which is to use those spiritual principles of A Course in Miracles. And when I say that, what I really mean is, when someone is challenged by a health problem, chances are, they might be praying a little bit, maybe even a lot, but they're probably also trying very hard to handle it themselves. And it makes it really hard for them because they feel like they're alone. They feel like nothing's working. So when I add in those prayer principles, I bring in God, honestly, and I ask God to help us. And I try to help this person make room in their mind and heart for that miraculous healing that is available to all of us. I try to find out, is there anything in the way of that? They might have had a parent that died of a terrible illness, and so they're not really convinced that God will help them. So there's things we have to look at to see, is there anything in the way or blocking them from truly receiving and incorporating God's help. In A Course in Miracles, it says there's really two big turning points. And one of those is to give up your opposition to being helped. But it's hard to give up that opposition when you feel like the one you're asking for help from either did not help you when you were in a jam before, or did not help someone else that you cared so much about. But in this case, she was quite receptive to any kind of help because she was in so much pain and her life had changed so much. She went from being this very athletic person, very high energy, very strong woman, as I recall. And then all of a sudden, she pretty much has to nurse this problem. So as we went through and applied, I love to do a little tapping. You don't have to have tapping to be healed. I don't want anybody to think that. I don't know if you've seen where people tap on their body, they do different tapping points. I use it while someone is praying because in a physical way, it just helps them release the pain, the worry, the anxiety, the feeling. Think of it this way. If someone was standing on your foot and maybe they didn't know that they were, but let's say they're standing on your foot and it hurts so much and you're trying to listen for God's answer or listen for some guidance, wouldn't that be hard? So what the EFT or the tapping does is it kind of gets the charge or the trigger or the anxiety down so that you can be a better listener and you can have a calmer mind. So I don't want you to ever think that healing is not an inside job, because it is, but I will always incorporate things that help, things that work, things that help us be better listeners. It might be music that makes you a person that can quiet your mind. It might be resting more frequently throughout the day. So, we do things in the body that all go towards that objective of feeling better and feeling more connected to our divine source. As I worked with this woman, we started to address some of the horrible feelings of rejection she had as a child. Now, as a woman in her late 60s, mentally, she was way down the road. She was a scholar, had taught many, many people, had proven herself as a very competent professor. So mentally, way down the road, probably didn't even really think twice about it. But here's the thing is that your heart, your emotional vault, it hasn't gotten down the road just yet. It's still sitting back there. You know, if she was 8 years old, 10 years old, whatever that was, whenever she had that experience, I can tell you as a seasoned practitioner that that is still sitting in her vault and it needs to be addressed. And then it needs to be turned over and given to God and let God replace that hurt and that pain with his love. So this is what we did. We went through that process together. And this whole time took about 45 minutes from start to finish. But what happened is after we did our first round of addressing just the pain and the sadness of that rejection, she didn't expect it. It just came on suddenly, but she had to deal with it for years. Now, think as a child, what happens is you start to form beliefs about what that means. Well, it would be easy to form a belief that I'm not lovable. I'm not as good as everybody else. I'm not like everybody else. And she couldn't speak the language at the time. Of course, she very quickly took care of that. But, you know, she couldn't speak the language. She couldn't communicate. So for a child, this can feel so harsh because we start to decide that we're not as good as everybody else. We're not complete. We are incomplete. We're not worthy, we are not worthy, you know. So we start to form these decisions, and then as an adult we end up living out those beliefs that we have decided about ourselves. After just the first round of really approaching the feelings of rejection and sadness and bringing in a little bit about leaving her best friend when she was a child, she already started feeling tremendous relief, and she started to take off her splint herself, which I thought was interesting. She started picking at it, and I thought, what is she doing? You know, because her hands were kind of crippled up, and I just saw her tugging on her splint. And then we decided to do one more round, and then she just went and untaped the whole thing and just yanked it off, and she literally just went like this, and she just said, "It's gone." It And she was just as shocked as you are right now. She was just like, she could feel the pain was gone. We didn't touch her hands. I just want you to really hear that. This is not about me. This is about the power of God, but it is also about understanding where the sickness is coming from, where the illness is coming from. And that is not just about arthritis. One thing I will ask you to consider today with an open mind and heart is that all healing is of the mind. The mind has to make the decision to accept that healing. The mind has to make the decision that the healing is not scary. You know, imagine you've spent your whole life having a chronic condition or a very big pain. It's almost become your identity. Like, I am this person with this pain, and I can't do this, and I can't go there, and I can't squat down. And, you know, you start to see yourself in a certain way. Well, if somebody that you've never met just comes up and sits down with you for 45 minutes and all of a sudden that pain could go, that sounds wonderful. But do you realize there's a part of your mind that almost can't let that happen because it would throw you into a quandary? Like, how could I have spent my whole life this way and then it could be undone that fast? I don't know. I don't think so. You know, in the back part of your mind, it would be very tempting to hold on to it. Also, what I've learned is a fear tends to come up because the person has always known themselves a certain way. And then there seems to be this fear of the future. Well, if I don't have this pain and I'm 67, let's say, what happens? Maybe I won't have disability income. Maybe I'll have to go back to work. Maybe, you know, all these things, they start flooding the mind. And that's what happens is our mind kind of shuts that gate again and says, no, I'm not right now. I do like the healing idea, but let me think about that. In A Course in Miracles, it says, wherever there is fear, healing will need to wait, because God will never offer you something that will make you more fearful. So you must remember this. And as we go through this process, I want you to really think about, is there any part of my own healing that would feel startling to me if it was simply just gone in the next 5 minutes? Would it make me concerned about my future? Would it make me feel like I am inadequate? Like, why didn't I get this answer sooner? Whatever that is, be willing to consider it and be willing to lay that fear back down. That was a miraculous healing. And I know Shar was there to help me remember some of those details. But all of us witnessed this woman become free. She mentioned on her way out the door that she was headed out to go book a mountain biking trip. That's how much she felt better. She was ready to roll. And I am so grateful. Probably the reason I love A Course in Miracles so much and why I teach it as much as I can is because I am so tired of the suffering. I don't know about you all. I'm not trying to defend against it, just so we're clear, but I am done with it. And anything I can do to help you be done with it too is a great day for all of us. So that was our friend in the healing of her arthritis. And really, there were two or three root causes. That's what I call them. Like, what is the root cause of this illness? Her root causes were, of course, that move over from the other country. That was really tough on her as a kid, and it didn't let up. And she went through it for years. And you could imagine every day just braced for pain, braced for rejection. So we had to address that. And then the loss of her very best friend, because she is now thousands and thousands of miles away. And the one time she really needed a best friend and she couldn't have that. So that was a great sadness in her heart. There was other things about not being able to be a ballerina anymore, not being able to mountain bike anymore. These are feelings of loss, and you kind of go through a grieving process. It's like losing yourself. So there's those things going on. There were maybe 3 to 5 root causes that were holding that arthritis in place. What I've learned through my own practice is that every part of the body seems to have a little job to do. When things are going on with your hands, usually it's that you are having a really tough time grasping life, not necessarily at 67, but maybe at 8 or 10 years old. Just life was too much. It was a burden. It was so much, and she still had to deal with it. So it ends up showing up in your hands, not being able to grasp life. Another time I had an issue with my feet, and I got this terrible infection in my toes, and they were blistering, and no one knew why. And it was horrible. If it had continued, I think I would have lost my toes. That's how bad it was. But I didn't know then, when I was 11, that the reason I was having problems with my feet, we prayed about it. We did get a miraculous healing. We didn't really do that for the first few days. We were trying to treat the problem. And then when it got so bad, we went straight to God and we did get our healing. Now I know, as an older person, now I know that I had a great fear of the future because we had just moved to a brand new place in the northern part of the state. I was terrified about going to this new school. I wanted to go to my old school. I came in the middle of a semester, so all the other kids were already up on what was happening. They knew what to do. I didn't know one thing. I didn't even know where the bathroom was. You know how that is. Probably you all have moved or gone into a place you don't understand. And it just put a clamp on me. And I was so scared. And I was used to doing really well. And I wasn't able to do really well yet. I had to catch up. So it started to show up in my feet. And what you'll find is usually with issues of the feet, I will say most of the time when I've resourced what's going on with the feet, it's some kind of concern or fear about the future. It might be that you feel that you're subject to a layoff and your income might run out, or you're worried about something happening, an upcoming surgery that you're really worried about. And then all of a sudden your feet cramp up or you get a sprained ankle, or, watch those feet. They'll tell you what you're thinking about your future. If you have financial fear, so much of the time that will show up right in the base of your spine. You'll get up and you'll be like, oh, and that's usually financial fear. If it's up in your neck and shoulders, that's usually what I found. It's usually close relatives that are, forgive me for this, but kind of a pain in the neck. You're going to find somebody in your family is bothering you. It might be their burden on your shoulders. It might be they are a burden. It might be whatever that is, but it's usually a very close relative if it's around your neck and shoulders. If you have pain in the middle of your back, what I have found is it's usually you are carrying a burden, either that is yours or someone else's. You might be laying awake at night trying to figure out how your daughter is going to save her home because she lost her job, or you're laying awake at night trying to figure out how you are going to save your home. So when you're carrying a burden, you'll experience that usually right in the middle of your back, and so on. The joints, if those are all locked up, it's usually that you are on some kind of lockdown around a particular issue, and you're just going to see that the body is pretty predictable. We like to just kind of dive in and find out what's going on in this particular area. The body is an effect of the mind. I just want you to really hear that. It's not a cause. If you're in pain right now, it is your mind that is producing the pain. It's your mind consenting to the pain. Doesn't mean you're a bad person or you're doing anything wrong. It just means that somewhere in your mind, you have accepted that you are separated from God, that you are a body, that you are not spirit, which is so easy to accept into your mind because you see it every day. So we're going to have to really redirect our attention over to our true reality, that we are eternal spirit, one with God. And in truth, we are invulnerable and we cannot be sick. The more we put our attention on the truth, instead, not in conjunction with, but instead of the illusion that we are a body that can be sick, then that really allows the Holy Spirit to intervene and to heal the part of your mind that is producing this sickness.